This is an ABC podcast. This is the WA Country Hour with Belinda Varaschetti on ABC Radio WA.
And it is great to be catching up with you on this Wednesday afternoon. Today, WA mining magnate Andrew Forrest is expanding his stake in Tasmanian salmon company Huon Aquaculture to more than 18%. And a little later in the hour, you are off to Kirkalocka Station, 500 kilometres northeast of Perth, where the owners are saying they're faced with absolute devastation after a truck rolled over, spilling thousands of litres of used oil into the local creeks.
It is quite thick. It's extremely smelly. You can see there are some pools where the oil has flown through and further downstream, but it has left a slick on the embankment, the grasses, the reeds, and been caught up in small little pools all through the creek system. It's really awful. It's really sad. It's horrible. We've had an amazing season this year with rain. We're up to 250 millimetres for the year. In previous years' totals, we were at 150 millimetres for the entire year last year and 115 for the previous year. So the rainstones are looking incredible, and it's just really devastating.
Blair Ridley will tell you more about that situation after 12:30. 12:06.
You're with Belinda Varaschetti for the WA Country Hour on ABC Radio WA.
WA Farmers believes the Australian grains industry needs to develop its own sustainability certification scheme or risk losing access to important on-farm chemicals such as glyphosate. The lobby group says existing requirements under the current go-to scheme, the ISCC, or International Sustainability and Carbon Certification Scheme, are perfectly fine. It's future changes to those regulations that really worries grain grower members. Mark Fowler farms at Williams and Harris Smith and is Vice President of the WA Farmers Grain Section. Mark, what are your key concerns about the current scheme?
I think the main concern we have is that the ICC scheme is based on and driven by the requirements of the EU. We have a number of concerns with that. Firstly, the EU chemical regulation system has shown itself to be very sensitive to popular opinion. That is, it's not rigorously scientific like our system in Australia, and we've seen that with, for example, Germany and France legislating to ban glyphosate and other chemistry like neonicotinoids. The other thing that we would say is that the Australian grains industry really has no input into that scheme. It's based in Cologne, Germany. It was set up originally to provide access into the European market, and it has grown to be something bigger than that. It's become quite a global brand for sustainability. I guess the third aspect is that it doesn't really take into account the differences in weather, soils, proximity to people and sensitive crops that we have in Australia. It's quite Europe-focused, and we don't think it adequately takes into account the different factors that might bear on the question of sustainability.
Is it possible into the future that the Australian farm sector could have an input into this ISCC scheme based out of the EU?
We've asked quite a few times for clarification about what the trajectory is of this scheme into the future, and what we've had so far, the main answer has been it's not really up to the ISCC, it's up to the EU, which is precisely our point, that we seem to be surrendering our sovereignty in this area. So whilst we do have engagement with the ISCC through our trade, at a grower level, we haven't been a part of that at all.
So that has really brought you to the point where you believe the best way forward is for the Australian industry to develop its own sustainability certification scheme.
Yes, we think that what will this year be estimated to be a $20 billion industry, that it's appropriate that we invest in our own provenance story to create a scheme that has a better fit for our industry in that it is rigorously scientific. It could be tailored to Australian weather, topography and proximity to population. informed by the Australian grains industry and the Australian people, and we think it would be a good fit for a scheme such as that to be administered by Grains Australia, the new Grains Australia. So whilst we're a bit behind the eight ball in terms of timing, we haven't got that globally established brand yet. There's good potential for us to realise value there and have control of that scheme.
Yeah, I'm curious to know whether you think, Australia, the grains industry here in Australia has left its run too late, because the EU scheme has really got that brand and reputation now, and to sort of launch a new system and to get the runs on the board is going to take some work.
Oh, I think that's right, but I don't know that it's too late. Any starting point for such a system would be what we already have. It is possible for a scheme to be accredited with the EU in exactly the same way as the ISCC is. Indeed, there are many existing schemes that are different to that already, 2BS, and there are others. I can also say that other countries they share the same concerns that we do with the direction of the ISCC scheme. Canada, we understand, shares the concerns and is interested in working with us to develop an alternative which is more suited to our industries.
Mark, what was the red flag for the grains industry for you with this particular scheme and sort of looking forward at what the potential might be?
It was when the ISCC sought to exclude methweight from its scheme last year. That is, they stated that if you used methweight anywhere in your farming system, you would be unable to be accredited after a certain date. And while we were able to secure, as an industry, an exemption from that requirement, it really put a spotlight on where this could go. In Europe, a lot of the chemistry that we use in Australia, paraquat, all of the organophosphates, neonicotinoids, this is all pretty important and critical chemistry to our farming system. Indeed, that's at the heart of what makes it sustainable, particularly in the case of glyphosate. We could see that how changes to certification requirements could move on these other forms of chemistry that are important to our system.
Okay, so you're generally worried about the future use of those sort of chemicals if the grains industry here in WA sticks with this scheme?
Yes. We've seen that France and Germany have already legislated to ban glyphosate. We don't think that's based on good science. We don't think that would produce a good result for sustainability there, and certainly not here. Glyphosate's a minimum till seeding system, which is absolutely critical to the sustainability of our grain sector, depends on that chemistry. So any move to put pressure on that chemistry would be a backward step for sustainability, in our view.
On ABC WA, this is The Country Hour. I'm Belinda Varaschetti. This is Mark Fowler, and he is Vice President of the WA Farmers Grains section, and talking about sustainability certification schemes and the need for Australian grains industry, to perhaps start really looking at its own sustainability certification scheme into the future. Mark, what are the current requirements under the scheme? They're not so burdensome at this point. Is that your point?
At the moment, they're relatively easy to achieve, and as a result of that, there's been good uptake by both growers and the trade. And I think it's important to point out that we are very comfortable with the existing requirements. Our main concern is about what the trajectory of this program is. We're trying to get a sense from the ISC what that looks like, but are having some difficulty with that.
Can you give us a kind of a dot point of what those requirements are?
The requirements are pretty straightforward. They relate mostly to land clearing, and they relate to the way in which you manage your chemical handling system, the practices that you use with crop protection products. Fairly straightforward. Most of the things we already do, indeed we're required by Australian laws and various QA systems to do.
And, it's not just the regulators who are embracing and driving this sustainability certification system schemes around the world and through all different parts of industry. Just recently we heard how the Commonwealth Bank claiming to have a first for Australian agriculture, and the amount of interest paid on a bank loan by a Queensland beef business is going to be charged according to how it reduces greenhouse gases, meets animal welfare targets and provides a safe workplace for all its staff. What do you make of that sector of the industry coming in and, from a banking perspective, putting those sort of requirements on industry too?
I think we're going to see it from a lot of non-ag directions. At a corporate level, companies are increasingly focusing on and finding ways to deliver on their ESG commitments. And one of the ways they're doing that is by incentivising customers, partners, players in their sphere of influence to make their practices conform to their stated objectives.
So it's not going anywhere, is it? I mean, you've got to get on board with this direction.
Absolutely. Completely accept that and understand that that's the case. And our main point here is that we don't want to find ourselves in a situation where we lose sovereignty over and control over the key practices that are critical to ensure not just the profitability of our systems, but the sustainability of them. And
what appetite is there for this from other parts of the industry?
Well, we've been talking to other farming organisations, and there's almost universal agreement about this. We all understand that there's a fair bit of work to do in this space. The New Grains Australia would be a good body to pursue this, and that's where we're focusing our effort at this time.
Good to talk to you, Mark. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you, Belinda.
Mark Fowler, he is Vice President of the WA Farmers Grain Section. And Mark is on Twitter. You might follow him at MDFowler100. And he's running a little Twitter poll just to see if you're keen to see an Australian version of a sustainability scheme, certification scheme up and running. 140 votes at this point, and a text from Mark just a little while ago saying 74% of you in favour of that option to have an Australian scheme at this stage. So you can jump on Twitter and have your say in that poll if you would like to, at MDFowler100 if you want to be part of it. 12:17.
I'm Bevan Eats from Manjimup, and you're listening to The Country Hour
on ABC Radio WA.
WA mining magnate Andrew Forrest is expanding his stake in Tasmanian salmon company Huon Aquaculture to more than 18%. Andrew Forrest's investment company Tatarang is making the move just 7 weeks after announcing it had bought a 7.33% stake in Huon, which is Tasmania's second largest salmon farming company. Now, this is an interesting development when you consider what you heard on Friday's Country Hour, that global meat giant JBS plans to buy Huon Aquaculture for $425 million, excluding debt. But as Andrew Forrest explains, there's more to come on this story.
We saw JBS appear and decided to move to just under the takeover threshold, 18-19%, because we'd like to see how Huon and JBS are going to react. We note in their 138-page scheme of arrangement that not once is animal husbandry or the environment mentioned in that massive scheme of arrangement document. Yet both those organisations, and particularly JBS, operate well within the natural environment, and animal husbandry is what they do. We have written to JBS and to Huon, laying out that we believe should be their two top priorities. We're disappointed that it's not mentioned, and we have become the second largest shareholder, and we're reaching out to other shareholders of Huon to say, actually, the environment and animal welfare should be the two top priorities of both JBS and Huon as we go forward. And we look forward to their response.
So is this about making sure you have a controlling stake so that those environmental concerns can be addressed, or is it about potentially launching your own takeover bid, trying to get other shareholders on board to support that takeover bid because you're more environmentally conscious?
It's certainly stating to JBS and to Huon, I'd put JBS first, that animal husbandry needs to be at the top of their list, and we will need to be fully convinced that globally, in their massive animal processing operations, that it is that. And for the purposes of the corporation's law, I can't signal to you anything stronger than that. But I can say that we're saying to JBS, we look forward to how you respond, because that will dictate how we respond. We are investing to ensure that Huon goes forward under the banner of deep offshore practices, not shallow onshore practices, like in Macquarie Harbour, land-based fish farming, and full environmental neutrality. Stocking densities in pens must be humane and achieve full carbon neutrality. Most of all, zero fish in fish meal. Our oceans are being rendered barren by the overfishing of what is the most inhumane form of delivering fish to your plate, and that's so-called wild caught. We're taking that standard to JBS and saying, JBS, look at your record. Why should you not be a champion in human rights? Why should you not be a champion for the environment in which you operate? And why should you not be a no pain, no fear standard bearer across the world for animal husbandry and animal processing?
Andrew Forrest talking about his stake in Huon Aquaculture with Will Murray. JBS has declined to comment on Andrew Forrest expanding his stake in Tasmanian salmon company Huon Aquaculture to more than 18%. 12:21. Well, Andrew Forrest is already involved in aquaculture here in Western Australia. Not everyone is happy with what he's trying to do in the Albany area, and you'll hear more about that shortly. First, turning the spotlight on JBS. Why is the world's largest meat processing company trying to muscle in on Australia's protein industry? Only about 9 weeks ago, the Brazilian-based company announced it was the successful bidder for the Riverlea pork business. Then on Friday, JBS announced its plans to take over Tasmanian salmon producer Huon Aquaculture. And all of that adds to JBS's ownership of abattoirs in beef and lamb, where the business already accounts for around a quarter of Australia's red meat kill. Matt Dalgleish is a meat industry analyst with Thomas Elder Markets. He says this all shows there's a lot of confidence in the whole protein industry.
Look, I think it's another vote of confidence in Australian produce to begin with, but also it's a real signal that these big players can see the potential in all types of meat proteins. You know, we know they're big in beef and sheep meat, as you said, but we've seen them now emerging into the pork space and now across to fisheries and salmon. So I think it's a fantastic deal, really.
Is there something unique about the market where it seems like JBS is the main company buying up so much of the Australian meat protein market? Why aren't other companies buying up like this?
Oh, look, I think they're certainly well placed globally, and particularly if you look at just the beef space, both the contrast between Australia and the US. So JBS are very big in the US space in beef. At the moment, it's the opposite of what's happening here. The beef packers in the US are making extraordinarily high margins, and that's allowing a big multinational like JBS to have, across their network, to have a lot of cash around to look for opportunities. And certainly we're seeing it in the beef space here within Australia. Margins are negative and have been for a year pretty much. And so, that's the time, I guess, when those multinationals can look to places where they can maybe pick up assets to complement their wider kind of footprint. And this appears to be the case now with movement into pork and into salmon.
So that's interesting, actually, at a time when it's probably the local competitors in Australia aren't making much money. It's difficult to be in meat processing. JBS, this company that has a footprint around the world, is making a lot of money in the US, and that gives them the cash to spend here?
Yeah, that's right. And, I mean, if you want to just have a think of the numbers, the last time Thomas Elder Markets ran the local beef processor margin model for June, we've got average losses through the month per head of about 250 Aussie dollars within Australia. If you contrast that to what's happening in JBS America in their beef processing space, we're talking about profit margins per head of 400 to 500 US per head. That translates to 600, 700 Aussie per head profit. So,
that's really interesting. So, if you were killing an animal in Australia, one animal, processors are losing over $200 on that animal in June. in America, they were making over $400 per animal. That's a big swing.
Yeah, US dollars too, Warwick, so you're talking, say, 600 Aussie. And that's not the highest they've seen recently. Back last year through that initial COVID disruption where we saw cattle prices come off in the US and the price of meat at the wholesale and retail level go up, their margins actually expanded to close to $900 US a head profit last year. But take that aside, these levels they're seeing now are pretty historic highs comparatively if you look back over the last 20 years or so.
So beef, lamb, pork and fish. Is there anything else for them to buy in for, this company?
Oh, look, they're fairly big in chicken as well, and obviously coming from Brazil, and Brazil is one of the largest exporters of chicken meat to the world. So that's probably another area where they could look to establish a footprint in another kind of regional centre. Probably the Australian chicken brand chicken's a kind of more commoditised product and maybe doesn't have those premiums attached that you get with certain beef products or with things like salmon. But there's always a room for a more diverse footprint for these big companies, so that's another area potentially.
Analyst with Thomas Elder Markets, Matt Dalgleish, speaking to Warwick Long. 26 past 12. As you heard earlier, JBS isn't alone with its interest in Australia's protein industry. In the last few years, prominent WA billionaire Andrew Forrest has gradually been acquiring more and more beef and seafood assets, and he's done that through one of his companies called Harvest Road. Andrew Forrest has plans to expand the aquaculture side of his business. In February last year, Harvest Road acquired Albany-based oyster farm Ocean Foods International. The company also wants to set up a shellfish aquaculture operation in Shoal Bay within Albany's Princess Royal Harbour. But not everyone is happy about where this is all going. For example, some commercial fishing operators are concerned they may be displaced if these sorts of aquaculture ventures are given the green light. Neil McGuffey is head of the Southern Seafood Producers Association, which represents wild harvest fishermen. He's worried the authorities haven't done the appropriate testing to find out if the water is suitable for shellfish farming.
Now, this is a program that is required to be undertaken to assure the public that bivalves, in this case, if they're grown via aquaculture or wild harvest, are fit for human consumption. So there's no point in having or developing an aquaculture industry and supporting the development of an aquaculture venture to grow bivalves in this case, which are known biofilters. So they filter the water column. If there are any heavy metals, etc., in the environment, they'll accumulate in these bivalves. So they're bioaccumulators. So you don't want to be you don't want to be selling a product into the community for human consumption if it hasn't passed the necessary rigour to make sure that it is fit for human consumption.
To the best of your understanding, that rigour has not been undertaken?
No, it hasn't. It's a bit cart before the horse type approach. There appears to be an imperative to allow this group or this proponent to come in and establish aquaculture without having done the necessary checks and balances to assure the broader community and the public, the seafood consuming public, that if the venture does go ahead and seafood is produced, it is then fit for human consumption. So it'd be our expectation, Southern Seafood Producers' expectation, that these checks and balances are conducted prior to allowing a venture to come in and establish tens of hundreds of hectares of aquaculture.
Which stakeholders specifically are involved at this point?
I believe there are a couple of stakeholders that are involved. I guess the proponent seeking the largest acreage or the largest number of hectares would be Harvest Road. I might reiterate that the wild harvest sector certainly doesn't have anything against the aquaculture sector. In fact, I believe that we can work together for mutually beneficial outcomes. There's no reason why each proponent's or each stakeholder's aspirations can't be met with the proper, transparent consultation and process put in place.
Given that's the case, what would you like to see from the department now?
Well, I think it's pertinent that the department does undertake that assessment, that WA Shellfish Quality Assurance Program, to provide the community, I guess, with the assurance that if in the event that the aquaculture venture is accepted and is approved, then that seafood, which is ultimately going to be produced and supplied to WA consumers, is fit for human consumption. So it's a case of Well, I guess if I can provide an analogy, a farmer wouldn't buy cattle without having the land there ready for the cattle to graze on and knowing that he's got good land for that cattle to graze on. It's exactly the same thing here. So you'd want to make sure that your environment is suitable to grow out the produce or the animals that you're anticipating growing out.
So how much do we know about the state of the water in Shoal Bay? And in particular, how does it compare to Oyster Harbour?
Look, I probably couldn't give you a scientific response to that. I don't know what the water quality parameters are in that area. Both water systems are prone to fluctuations in water temperature, the fluctuations in salinity. They're quite dynamic systems. You raise a good point. Just because we don't know doesn't mean we shouldn't explore. Let's start small. Let's walk before we can run. So ideally, and it would make sense to me, that you would trial a small area first, then you would scope that up based on the success of that small trial.
How many fishers are presently working in Shoal Bay? And how confident can we be that they'll be displaced if this goes ahead?
So there are currently 6 estuarine fishermen working out of Shoal Bay, and these guys have been fishing in this area for decades. This is one of the oldest fisheries in Western Australia, and I think we should be very proud of that the fishery is sustainable. It provides seafood locally to local restaurants, to local families, to local processors, and is an integral part of the social and economic structure of the community. Now, without the proper consultation, there is a real risk that our fishermen, the wild harvest fishermen, could be displaced when there's absolutely no need for that. It's quite possible to sit down with both parties, with both stakeholder groups, the aquaculture sector and the wild harvest sector, and negotiate terms that are mutually beneficial.
And does this extend beyond Shoal Bay? Do you have other areas that you're concerned are perhaps not receiving the scrutiny that they need at this stage of the negotiations?
At the moment, we've been able to successfully negotiate fair outcomes for all parties across other areas. The sticking point seems to be Shoal Bay at the moment, and we're hoping that through that open and transparent dialogue, we can achieve an outcome that is mutually beneficial.
Neil McGuffey, he is the Executive Officer for the Southern Seafood Producers Association of WA, speaking to Angus McIntosh. Steve Nell is the Aquaculture Manager for Deepherd, and he says the WA Shellfish Quality Assurance Program has started in the harbour around Shoal Bay and says it will be finished in about 18 months. Neil McGuffey is concerned a decision might be made on the area's aquaculture lease before that quality assurance program is finished. We did contact WA Fisheries Minister Don Punch about this, and he simply says a decision will be made soon. On the Country Hour, 27 to 1, and Brianna Shepherd is here with an update from the newsroom.
Hello. The New South Wales Premier says a surge in COVID cases is likely to continue. The state recorded 344 new cases and 2 more deaths today, including a man in his 90s and another man in his 30s who died in hospital. Gladys Berejiklian says restrictions could be eased if the state reaches 6 million jabs by the end of the month. Meanwhile, the WA Premier has flagged tougher measures to ensure COVID-19 does not come into the state from New South Wales. Mark McGowan says very few people are currently coming into Western Australia from the eastern states. He says the enhanced hard border arrangement could get tougher. And Melbourne's lockdown has been extended for another week after the state recorded 20 new local COVID cases. Victorian health authorities say with 5 new mystery cases reported, the risk of further unknown infections in the community makes it impossible to ease restrictions. More news coming up on the hour.
Thank you for that, Brianna. 24 to 1.
You're with Belinda Varaschetti on the Country Hour on ABC Local Radio WA.
Actually, make that 26 to 1. Between now and the news at 1, a wrap of the Katanning sheep market for you. You'll call in to Kirkalocka Station just to check on that waste oil spill that's caused a lot of damage to the creeks on that property. And then off to Mingenew. The Mingenew Midwest Expo is on, up and running. You'll be there shortly. First, though, off to the Bureau of Meteorology. Matt Boderhoven with you this afternoon. And Matt, any clear skies over the Southwest Land Division this afternoon?
Yeah, good afternoon, Belinda. Clear skies, not quite yet. We're having a little break now from winter over the next few days. Won't be as bad as what we've seen over the last few weeks. But on Thursday, we've got a ridge of high pressure will drift southwards over the southwest land division. Still be a couple of showers southwest of Lion, Lancelin to Hopeton and along the Esperance coast. Rainfall though fairly light, less than 1 millimetre, might be 2 or 3 millimetres near the western south coast. On Friday, the ridge of high pressure will contract eastwards and a weakening cold front will reach the southwest Cape during the late afternoon and evening. Showers southwest of Lion, Perth to Albany. Rainfall will be a little bit, around 8-10 millimetres around the southwest Capes and 5 millimetres in the inland parts of the southwest, and maybe less than 3 millimetres in the southern parts of the lower west. Then on Saturday, that front will contract away, contract south of the state, and a ridge will settle in over the Great Southern. Showers southwest Lion, Jurien Bay to Islip Bay. But rainfall will be fairly light, less than 2 millimetres. Then on Sunday, conditions will improve. Ridge will drift south of the state. An easterly flow will start establishing itself over the southwest land division. Mostly sunny conditions there on Sunday, and temperatures looking like maximum temperatures 17 to 20 degrees through most parts of the southwest land division, and maybe 21, 22 through the central west there.
And what have you got for the rest of WA, northern and eastern parts?
Yeah, so on Thursday, mostly sunny conditions through the north, a little bit of frost through the interior and Goldfields and Eucla. There on Thursday morning, easterly winds fresh and strong near the Pilbara-Kimberley coast there on Thursday. On Friday, mostly sunny conditions, again a little bit of frost through the Goldfields, mostly sunny conditions there on Saturday, maybe the hint of a shower near the Pilbara coast and the far southwest parts of the Goldfields and Eucla. Then on Sunday, might be a chance of a shower or thunderstorm around the central and western parts of the Pilbara and the northern parts of the Gascoyne. Won't be a lot of rainfall in it, maybe just 1 or 2 millimetres. Possible shower near the Eucla coast.
And warnings today?
Some strong winds along the West Kimberley coast, Pilbara coast east, the Ningaloo coast.
Thank you for that, Matt. 23 to 1. Richard Hudson is here now. There has been a bit of rain about, Richard, so if you read it all, you'd probably be here till the news at 1 o'clock. So you've done some editing?
There's not that much, no. Well, start in the Southwest Land Division forecast districts, and most locations in that area seem to have got, say, between 1 and 10 mils. But because this has been going on for a while, we'll just highlight some of the main ones. In the Central West, the most was Northampton with 10, and then Latham, New Norcia and Wundy all ended up with 8 mils. And then in the lower west, most places got, again, between sort of 1 and 10-ish. But above that, Gingin had 18 and Glen Eagle received 11. In the southwest, slightly higher totals there, but the top ones there, Beedelup 21, Pemberton 22, Quinninup 24, and then in the southern coastal region, Albany 21, Denmark 21 to 23, Kimberley 19, King River 20, Tamar 18. In the central wheat belt, it was mostly between 1 and 10, with just a few exceptions here and there. Bungulla 9, Noongar 13, Westonia 7. And then in the Great Southern region, the top ones were Chaming up with 6, Cranbrook 11, Lake King 6, Narrogin 8 and Williams North had 7. But I'll reiterate, there was still a fair few places had above 5, but maybe not too much more than 10. But just going to the northern and eastern forecast districts, there hasn't been a huge amount to read out in recent times, and there certainly isn't much in the last 24 hours. Nothing in the Kimberley, nothing in the Pilbara. Into the Goldfields, the top was around about 3 mils. In the Euclid district, Baladonia had 5. Nothing really worth reading out on the islands. The intriguing one, though, is the Gascoyne. The top today was only 4 mils at Paynes Find, but if you're a careful observer of the rainfall figures or a careful listener, you'll realise that in the northern Gascoyne region in the last week, some stations have just gradually been getting little bits of rain here and there each day. So no dramatic, huge falls that are worth raving about and writing headlines about. But when you add them up, the people who are on those stations are actually pretty happy with what's fallen. At Maya Station, about 200 kilometres north of Carnarvon, they've had about 80 mils over 3 days. So compared to the southwest, you think, oh, well, that's not much. But the owner, Jim Dorrell, says it's absolutely beautiful to see the country getting that sort of rain, and it's already responding because they've been very, very dry in recent years.
It's better than being happy. Yeah, it is absolutely unbelievable because we moved here in 2008. And we had 3 years that were dry and nowhere near as bad as what we've just gone through. But going back as far as 16, 17, they were just ordinary years. Our rainfall was well down below average, but we got a season. And then when we had the 3, most of 18, 19 and 20 being dry, we didn't come off the back of a good year, so we come off the back of some pretty ordinary years. But now it's looking good.
Yeah, what does it mean for you guys moving forward?
Well, we obviously had to reduce numbers back a little bit, and then we fed hay sort of from about October, and we took that punt to feed hay and wean early and keep our breeders, try and maintain our breeders. And it was a calculated risk feeding hay. We could have sold cattle, we could have found adjustment, but we opted to feed because traditionally we get that summer rain, and we was just hoping that we'd run into, that we would run into summer rain, but we also had a, plan B if it didn't. Hopefully that we've still maintained the fertility in the herd, and that's replenished the country. And if you do run into another dry year, shortly, we've got a good reserves there.
Jim Dorrell from Maya Station, about 200 kilometres north of Carnarvon, speaking to James Liveris. 19-1. And you're off to Kirkalocka Station, about 400 kilometres east of Geraldton now, where a massive clean-up is underway after waste oil from a road train spilled into the station's creek. On the 30th of July, the oil tanker was travelling on the Great Northern Highway when it was involved in an accident that released the 33,000 litres of waste oil on board. Blair Ridley is co-owner of Kirkalocka and says she only became aware of the oil spill a week after the accident.
Well, on the 30th of July, we had no idea what had occurred. We didn't know about the accident. It was approximately 4 kilometres north of our property. We travelled past the accident a couple of times following it, but we didn't realise what had happened and the extent of what had happened until on Thursday, the 5th of August, when we received a text message from, I believe, a contractor who was employed to start the cleanup, who advised us of the spill and that could he make contact with us to discuss it. And so that was the first we'd heard that there was an oil spill.
So what information were you given about what had happened?
Initially, that was it, that there was an oil spill. And what we found out about the situation was when it was Jared, he went for a walk and to have a look what had happened, and that's when he discovered the absolute devastation. I'm sorry, it's still very upsetting. It's just a lot of oil and it's just penetrated through our creek system.
I understand how emotional and upsetting this is for you. I have seen the videos from your property. Can you just give us a detailed description of what it's like and what you've seen?
So where the truck had the accident, it was luckily, from what we know, no one was hurt, which was a relief as well. But it has rolled directly into a tributary of our creek system. So that spot on the highway where it has crashed, on a map, you can follow the creek all the way down to our main creek adjacent to our homestead, the Kirkalocka Creek, which is well known, Nadia. We have people from not only across Australia but from the world who come to do bird spotting and enjoy the wildlife here. It's very well known. So Jared went and he followed it on foot from the highway. He walked about 1.5 kilometres and all through the little feeder creeks. There's hundreds of pools and they're coated in oil. The creek then, before it hits our main pond or pool area near our house, it's divided into two. So it has a grassy embankment in the middle. And on both sides of that embankment, there's just oil for approximately 3 kilometres, which we discovered over the course of probably Thursday and Friday last week on foot, having an explore ourselves. It is quite thick. It's extremely smelly. You can see there are some pools where the oil has flown through and further downstream, but it has left a slick on the embankment, the grasses, the reeds, and been caught up in small little pools all through the creek system. It's really awful. It's really sad. It's horrible. We've had an amazing season this year with rain. We're up to 250 millimetres for the year. In previous years' totals, we were at 150 millimetres for the entire year last year and 115 for the previous year. So the rainflows are looking incredible. And it's just really devastating.
I have seen the videos, and it is spread far and wide. It does look very thick, and I see you can see that there are some animals, some turtles that are pulled out, and they're completely covered in oil. Yeah, that's correct. So a couple of days in, Jared found the first turtle that was coated in oil, and so then I hadn't been out there, Nadia, because I knew that it was just going to be too upsetting for me. But a couple of days ago, I went out there and had a look for myself, and that's when we found the second turtle in the oil pool. I don't know the makeup of waste oil, but I was pleased that it was really easy to get the oil off the turtle, so that was a plus. But since then, we've found deceased birds and countless yabbies and insects are just all coated in oil, and we're just slowly collecting them as we go. Now, the company is in charge of the clean-up. Has that started?
The clean-up company was on site from Thursday when we were initially contacted, but the clean-up itself didn't start until Monday, the 9th of August, which was this Monday just gone.
And this happened on the 30th of July. That's a fair bit of time.
Yeah, it's definitely concerning. It's naturally concerning for us, the time that has passed.
Now, you've been calling locals in to help as well. Do you feel the clean-up so far is adequate? Because I do have a statement here from the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation, and they say that clean-up will require the removal of contaminated soil and water. A vacuum truck, a spill-absorbent booms and a recovery tanker have been deployed to recover any soil and water that has been affected by oil. Has that all arrived?
We went down to have a look at the clean-up on Monday. They're starting from the highway end, and there were some of those items we could see on site, but to my knowledge, there's more of those items that you mentioned, those clean-up equipment, trucks, etc., that have arrived yesterday and today. But we haven't been out to the site following going there on Monday.
And Blair, I understand you were making a lot of calls to a lot of departments and regulatory authorities to try and get the clean-up moving a little quicker. Are you concerned that things have not moved fast enough here?
Yes, absolutely. So when we found out on Thursday, we really felt like we were in the dark, and we just head down, bum up, Nadia, and we called every single person, every single department that we can think of. And we have been speaking to those constantly since then. We've contacted universities. We've spoken to multiple wildlife rescue. We've written a letter to the Minister for Environment. It just goes on and on. It's overwhelming, the effort that we're going to try and move this process along. And then, as you know, from Facebook, we put the call out because we just didn't know how to tackle helping the wildlife, and we were really worried about what was happening there. And we've had a fantastic response from the public. There's so many people, it's just amazing, who are coming out to the station to help us with the wildlife. And I think that the next step will be on our side of things to do another call and to start doing a clean-up ourselves. We have been approached by local businesses to, we've got a lot of mining and industry in the area, and we've had people ringing to donate spill equipment, which is definitely something that's vital to cleaning up this kind of mess. It's a logistical nightmare, so I understand that it's very difficult, but it just has to happen. So, there must be ways that we can get this cleaned up.
And Blair, I understand you've also spoken to a lawyer. Why?
We have concerns for the future of the creek and the environment now, and we just want to safeguard into the future that it's going to be restored to its pristine condition that it was, and that contact came about when we were brainstorming and literally contacting as many different people as we can for advice. And so far it's been very helpful to speak with an environmental lawyer.
Blair Ridley, co-owner of Kirkalocka Station with Nadia Mitsopoulos. The Department of Water and Environmental Regulation says the company transporting the used oil is responsible for the cleanup and the associated costs, and DWER is monitoring the situation. The cleanup recovery contractors are on site. And following concerns raised by Kirkalocka Station Homestead regarding the cleanup, DWER has deployed pollution response officers to the site to monitor the process. And following today's assessment, if necessary, DWER will adjust the cleanup program being undertaken by the recovery contractor. 9 minutes to 1, not far away from a wrap of the Katanning Sheep Market. First though, next stop is Mingenew to have a look around the 38th Mingenew Midwest Expo, which is on today, 380 kilometres north of Perth. Geraldton-based rural reporter Lucinda Jose is there. Lou, this is the first of the 2021 field days in WA's agricultural region. How's it shaping up?
We have a magnificent day here, Belinda. The cars are streaming into the car park in a really orderly fashion when I came in today. Then there was a nice lineup at the gate as I came through. Organisers usually expect several thousand people, and we do have an absolutely magnificent day today. But the evidence of the rain is here. There is mud in the walkways, Belinda, which I don't think I've seen at Mingenew for quite a while.
Now, so many events were obviously cancelled and still are being cancelled due to COVID. Can you just remind me, did this event go ahead last year as normal?
It didn't go ahead as normal. It was cancelled last year due to the pandemic. There was like a small demonstration of machinery for local farmers, which was kind of organised quite quickly because they didn't want to miss out, basically, but nothing like the gala event that we have today.
Now, you mentioned all the rain that's been around. I imagine there is a real sense of optimism this season, and I guess the exhibitors there might be just a little bit excited about drumming up some business today.
Yes, I think they are pretty excited. I have a few exhibitors here with me. I've got Corey Moylan from Moylan Silos and Brian Pova from Carew Seeds. Brian, do you think this could be a fruitful day for companies hoping to drum up business?
Yes, Lucinda, I think this is a fantastic opportunity for people to come back to this field day, considering last year was cancelled with the COVID, and we expect a lot of people here due to the great weather conditions, and also having the opportunity to at last get to have a look at what suppliers and machinery dealers and people have got to offer. We're expecting a great crowd this year, and we've already seen a lot of people come in and have a look at what we're doing.
You have consistently had quite a few people here every time I've walked past your stall. What in particular are people talking about for this year, and what's special about this year?
What's special about this year is, production is probably the best we've seen for 30 years in regard to all the crops that farms are growing. Wheat, barley, oats, lupins and canola are fantastic, and a lot of people are looking for new varieties for seeding for next year, and how they can source their seed requirements, whether it's canola or wheat or whatever the new varieties coming along. And so our job is to try and give them some advice and educate them on what's new that's coming along. And we have obviously Pacific Seeds with us here today with some new canola varieties. We have 4 new wheat varieties this year, and we have some plants here for people to look at.
Corey, if I come to you, you've come a long way with your silos. What are people talking to you about? What's special about this year for you?
What's special about this year is, we're back. So the 3 field days, Mingenew, Darren and Newdigate are back on, so everyone's got a bit of their skip in their step, and and it's just fantastic to be out and about. But there's the main topic, I guess, is grain storage and the fantastic yields that it look like there's going to be around. Everyone's sort of scrambling around, see where they're going to put their crops that they take off.
Have you got field bins to sell today?
Unfortunately, we've sold out of our field bins, but grain silos we've still got the capacity to supply them. So there's a little bit of a shortage in the field bin market at this stage.
Are field days like this one as important as they once were? I mean, did you miss last year not having one?
Hard to say whether we sort of make sales or not make sales on the day. We didn't notice any downturn in sales last year because of no field days, but I think the key is the locals all put so much energy and work into setting up the field days. All three, even wage, and so it's just very, very important to support that. And it's just fantastic to have these events and get everyone together and out and about, and the season's looking absolutely fantastic. So it's good to see everyone with a smile on their dial.
And Brian, for you, are field days as important as they once were?
Yes, they are. Obviously, farmers have limited time, and we've been coming here for 25 years in the same site. And it is important to touch base with people, and they're also busy these days, and we do need to support the local communities who put these events on. Thank you so much,
Brian Pover from Kooroo Seeds and Corey Moylan from Moylan Silos. And that's it, Belinda. I am off to enjoy the expo. It's nice to be back.
I bet it is. Thank you, Lou. Lucinda Joes checking in today from the 38th Minginoo Midwest Expo. 4-1. There was a sheep sale at Katanning today, and Tracy Kilner's been keeping an eye on it just for you. Hi, Tracy. How did it go today?
Hi, Belinda. Numbers were up, 416 head for a total yarding, 8,729. Lamb prices fluctuated on quality, finishing easier for the plainer lambs with little demand and gaining on quality and heavier weight pens. Another good quality yarding of mutton was presented with prices mainly equal. The best heavy lambs sold at $230, trending up on last week. All regular processor buyers were in attendance, but not all operating, and a large gallery of feeder restocker buyers were chasing the quality stores. Lightweight lambs under 16 kilos carcass weight sold from $75 to $130. Under 18 kilo carcass weight lambs made from $109 to $147. Light trade weight lambs sold for $124 to $141, and heavier tradies made $148 to $173. Heavyweight lambs sold from $168 to $196, and extra heavyweights returned $230 a head. Young merino ewes sold from $70 to $230 depending on weight in a mixed quality yarding. Light store ewes sold from $90 to $101. Heavier stores sold to $167 with a full fleece. Medium weight prime ewes weighing under 30 kilos carcass weight made $150 to $238. A good yarding of heavyweight ewes over 30 kilos sold from $200 to $270. A large yarding of heavy wethers made $210, while young hogget wethers returned $120 to $130 for lightweights, and good heavier lines to processors sold from $230 to $240 a head. Mature rams made from $60 to $180 depending on weights, while ram lambs sold from $60 to $214 for heavyweights. This has been Tracy Kilner for Meat and Livestock Australia's National Livestock Reporting Service.
Thank you for that, Tracy. And demand for sheep is obviously very high right across Australia because yet another commercial ewe price record has been set for Australian whites. This time, the price has broken through the $1,000 a head barrier. Selling on Auctions Plus yesterday, Rodney Vudasek from Bundalong in northeast Victoria sold 40 scanned-in lamb ewes for $1,015 a head, breaking the previous record by $21. 2 minutes to 1.
Hello, I'm Sally Sarah. Join me for The World Today. Barnaby Joyce says the Nationals won't support a net zero 2050 climate target until he knows the cost, especially for regional Australia. The Taliban continue their push across Afghanistan, Could Kabul fall within months, or can Afghan forces defend it? And a woman poses as a doctor at a Sydney hospital for 8 months before authorities catch up with her. Those stories and more coming up this lunchtime on The World Today.
8 months. I'm looking forward to that story. News not far away. Earlier in the hour, you heard from Mark Fowler talking about the need for the Australian grains industry to develop its own sustainability certification scheme. And Ray from Each Pingelly supports that. As a significant food exporter, he says it's imperative Australia develops its own set of agricultural industry compliance rules. Well done, Mark, for raising the issues as at least a message to farmers who need to be more aware of past the farm gate. Thank you for that, Ray. And it's been good to catch up with you this afternoon. Time now for ABC News, 1 o'clock.
You've been listening to an ABC podcast. Discover more great ABC podcasts, live radio and exclusives on the ABC Listen app.